Yeah. Analytics off the chain, other channels not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headliner Nation, we running the game. I'm a headliner.
What is going on, Headliner Nation? Jake, Fantasy Headliners. Hopefully everybody's doing well out there today. We're coming at you today with a new topic, something new, something fresh, something we've never talked about before. Honestly, I don't know if I've seen anybody on any other channel talking about this kind of stuff before, so do me a favor, hit the like button for some new content, because today I'm going to call this show What Happened Was. Because I was just sitting here at my desk getting ready to dive into week 4, chilling with Barry right here next to me, and I got to thinking, a lot of people may see our shows on a weekly basis and they'll see our opinions backed up by facts, but how do we come to those conclusions? Well, sometimes you have to dive beyond the box score, right? You can't just look at the surface stats, look at the entire picture and find out if we have something to worry about on our hands or if it was something that was just a bad game that we need to move on from, and hopefully things get better as the season progresses. So that's what we're going to do here today. I got a few players we're going to discuss that really underperformed in week 3. Should we be worried heading into week 4? Or is it just some bad luck that we got to take and hopefully it doesn't happen again? That's what we're talking about here today. However, if I'm going to leave Barry sitting right here next to me, I got to mention our friends over at pristineauction.com. There is a link down below in this description. If you head over to pristineauction.com, sign up for a new account and use the promo code Headliners, we're going to send you a $10 off coupon off your first purchase. It's free to set up the account. You don't have to go buy anything, but you can go browse some of the awesome things that, I mean, come on. I have a pylon signed by Barry Sanders. I got a Jarvis Landry helmet back here. I got a George Kittle football. I got a Christian McCaffrey. I mean, they got all kinds of stuff over at pristineauction.com. Go over there and browse. Just create that free account and use that promo code Headliners. And trust me, you'll find something for your man cave. But now it's time to dive into the first player. I'm going to have timestamps down below by position. So if you like timestamps, just another reason to hit the like button. Let's dive into some quarterbacks here, though, to start off with. And the first guy is going to be Daniel Jones of the New York Giants, somebody who I had a little bit higher expectations for in week 3. Now, this is what we're going to do for all of these players. We're going to break this down into game script, opportunities, turnovers, any impacting injuries, and then a final conclusion with everything kind of tied together. So let's start off with game script for Daniel Jones. Now, this was a close game throughout. It really shouldn't have limited his upside to the point of where they get a big lead and they just rely on running the ball and really takes out that ceiling because he's not having to throw. Not the case in this game. A close game means a game in which he has opportunities to continue to throw. All right, so it wasn't really game script based. What about on opportunities? Well, he really stayed on average from where he's been the entire year. As long as pass attempts per game go, yards per attempt, rushing attempts per game. But the biggest issue here as far as opportunities is even though he was getting the same volume all over the field, he didn't get any touchdowns, right? No touchdowns through the air, no touchdowns on the ground. That was a huge limiter to Daniel Jones here this week. What about turnovers? A costly turnover by Evan Ingram. That just takes away a potential scoring opportunity. Impacting injuries, though, and this is the big one. This is the one I'm really keying in on for Daniel Jones. Both Sterling Shepard and Darius Slayton left this game in the first half with hamstring injuries. That is a problem. When you lose 2 of your best playmakers in the first half, that's not a good thing in the NFL. Plus, Kenny Golladay came into the game on a limited basis and only saw 6 targets and saw the fewest amount of snaps that he's had in a game. That is a huge, huge loss. You add in the fumble by Evan Ingram, and things just got to a point where his ceiling was just really capped on the day. So in conclusion, honestly, this has to do with injuries. A banged up Kenny Golladay, and then you lose Sterling Shepard, who's been balling out. Then you lose Darius Slayton. You're really limiting the potential. Now, one thing also, Saquon Barkley. I want to make sure I mention him as well. He was back. Was he 100%? I'm going to say dude's like 92% because he really saw a huge uptick in volume and in production, which is going to take away some of those rushing opportunities we've seen from Daniel Jones in the past. However, he's still going to run the ball occasionally, but we need those touchdowns through the air to give him that weekly, safe, exciting floor. With all these weapons injured, that's going to be a problem. How long do they miss? That's something we're paying attention to and something we'll talk to the doc about on Friday. Next quarterback, what about Lamar Jackson? Now, how did Lamar Jackson fall outside of the top 10 as a quarterback? Well, what about game script? I mean, the Ravens never led by any more than 10 points, so he should have had plenty of opportunities to throw and run the entire game. Now, listen, I can hear you through the screen right now. I know exactly what you want to comment down below. Yes, I've watched the game. Be patient. I'll get to it because we're all thinking the same thing here. What about opportunities? He had the most pass attempts in a game that he's had this season with 31. However, the fewest rush attempts in a game so far this year with only 7. He'd been averaging right around 14 a game. In fact, the Ravens as a whole only ran the ball 22 times on Sunday. Before this past week, they hadn't had less than 34 rush attempts in a game. But let's be honest here, we all know why Lamar Jackson didn't score more fantasy points. And we could beat around the bush and we could be nice, or we could just blame Hollywood Brown, because honestly, I'm blaming Marquise Hollywood Brown. He dropped 2 deep touchdowns that were for sure touchdowns. The third one he dropped could have been a touchdown. Regardless, though, it would have been a big play. 3 huge drops for Hollywood Brown really limited the potential ceiling of Lamar Jackson and knocked him outside of the top 10 in most scoring formats. Were turnovers an issue? Not really. I mean, he did have 1 interception, which isn't great, but that's not going to overall limit your ceiling. Were there any impactful injuries in this offense? No, there really weren't. He didn't have anything, for once to worry about there in Baltimore. So in conclusion, honestly, Hollywood let the bright lights get in his eyes or something this week, because he is the main reason why the ceiling was not there for Lamar Jackson in week 3. However, this is what we can take away. Be encouraged, because we saw Lamar deliver the ball deep down the field. Great passes. He put the ball where it needed to be. It was the receiver that let him down. If those turn into receptions here in the future, I like what I saw from Lamar Jackson delivering that deep ball, and it could really open up the passing game. Plus, really started to utilize Mark Andrews once again. I'm not worried at all moving forward about Lamar Jackson. What about a couple running backs now? Let's talk about Jonathan Taylor. How is Jonathan Taylor not in the top 10 this past week? Well, let's look at the game script. I mean, this game stayed close, mostly within 1 score all the way up until the 4th quarter. So really, not any real reason why he was limited here. Opportunities? Well, he had the fewest touches in a game so far this season with only 11. However, when he touched the ball, he did great because he averaged 6.4 yards per carry, which is ungodly high for running backs in the NFL. Now, Nyheim Hines, he got a carry inside the 10-yard line, which you hate to see. Happened in the 2nd quarter, and it resulted in a touchdown. That is a touchdown off the board that Jonathan Taylor didn't have the opportunity at. Plus, Nyheim Hines once again really recaptured the bulk of the passing work. Had 6 targets this past week. Also, one thing to really worry about a little bit is Nyheim Hines also outsnapped Jonathan Taylor this week, 34-29. That is slightly concerning. Were there any turnovers that could have led to this? No. How about impacting injuries? Yes, a big one. In fact, a huge one. Loss of guard Quentin Nelson to a potential high ankle sprain. This guy is arguably the best guard in football. Losing him on your offensive line, that's a problem, right? Because you definitely do not want to lose any offensive lineman, much less an all-pro guard in Quentin Nelson. So for conclusion, you got to stay the course here with Jonathan Taylor. We saw this exact same thing, did we not, in 2020 with Nyheim Hines getting occasional boosted workloads? However, Taylor performed when he was called upon, and people panic sold this guy last year way too early, but we know how that story ended. He's got huge ceiling potential on an offense that's going to have to utilize him, especially with Carson Wentz banged up. The biggest concern for me here is the offensive line. Can they hold it together? Can they replace Quentin Nelson long enough for him to return at some point this year before the season is just lost? Not panic selling Jonathan Taylor just yet, but I'm only going to give it like another week or two before I have to start making some difficult decisions. What about David Montgomery? He didn't really go full Monty in week 3, did he? How did he fall outside the top 10? Heck, how did he fall outside the top 20 at this point? Well, the game script, the Bears were in the game for 3 quarters, right? It didn't really get out of hand until the 4th quarter there for the Bears, opportunity-wise. Well, he saw the fewest carries in a game this season with only 10. But the target volume in the passing game, that stayed consistent. He didn't lose passing work to anybody. Was it Justin Fields' fault? Was he taking added touches on the ground away from David Montgomery? No, he was not. Fields only had 3 rush attempts and no other running back touched the football this past weekend. So that was not the problem. The problem was the offensive line, which was absolutely overwhelmed all day long. Justin Fields was sacked 9 times. There was no turnovers to worry about for David Montgomery, no other impacting injuries. In conclusion, though, Matt Nagy is the new Adam Gase. That offensive line was being overwhelmed the entire game, and Matt Nagy did nothing to help them out. Justin Fields only threw the ball 20 times this past week. 13 out of those 20 attempts came with only 5-man protection on the offensive line. No added tight ends. Nobody in there to chip block. Nothing. And that's going against Jadeveon Clowney and Myles Garrett. I'm sitting here in my house, and I know better than that. Are you telling me that a NFL head coach couldn't do something to try to help this kid get a little bit more time, open up a little bit more of an opportunity just anywhere? The game was doomed from the start, and the offense just can't get anything going. Matt Nagy needs to go. Dude needs to be fired because he is absolutely killing this offense, which could be pretty special in my opinion in Chicago. But now, this coming up week, they get Detroit. They really need a get-right game, right? But what does Matt Nagy do? He comes out and says that all 3 quarterbacks have a chance to start, only making this offense even more confusing and making it more difficult for each and every one of these guys to succeed on a weekly basis. Matt Nagy sucks, and that is my conclusion. On to wide receivers. What about Tyreek Hill? How did he fall outside the top 24? What about game script? Well, the Chargers grabbed an early 14-3 lead, which is a good thing for wide receivers of the Chiefs. Why? Because they're behind. They're going to have to throw the ball the entire time. So that is good news. So it wasn't game script. What about opportunities? Well, the most pass attempts in a game so far this season with 44. However, Patrick Mahomes had his lowest completion percentage in a game this season with only 61.3%. Plus, the lowest yards per pass attempt that I can remember in Kansas City in recent history at only 5.91 yards. That is not what you want to see for a burner wide receiver like Tyreek Hill that's known for the deep ball. If they're not throwing the ball deep, Tyreek Hill is going to be limited a lot because he still saw the same amount of targets. 7 targets, had 5 receptions. But Mahomes threw passes to 11 different receivers. Now, I hate to just sit back here and say, they missed Sammy Watkins because it is Sammy Watkins. But this team really misses a solidified number 2 wide receiver to draw away defensive attention. They need it because what other teams are doing now is just taking away Tyreek Hill over the top and forcing them to beat them with other receivers, guys who just can't do it, right? There's no replacement for a Tyreek Hill out there. Mecole Hardman, he's just taken too long to really become that number 2 guy. Does the signing of Josh Gordon add to this? I'm not about to just say that Josh Gordon's going to come in and light the world on fire because he's in Kansas City. However, if he can make it on the field, get a couple good grabs here and there, be somebody who's serviceable that the defense just has to pay attention to, that will help the likes of Tyreek Hill going forward. Now, as far as turnovers, he did have 1 fumble this past week, which we do not want to see. However, that's only his 2nd fumble in the last 4 regular seasons. So it's not a problem. Nothing to really worry about there. No other impacting injuries. So in conclusion, I really believe that defenses are just focused at taking away Tyreek Hill over the top. No true wide receiver on the opposite side to pull away coverage, and I'm hoping that Josh Gordon can help with that. Are the Chiefs, quote unquote, figured out by the NFL? In a way, I think that they kind of are. That doesn't mean that they're just done, they're over with, they're not going to be good. That's not what I'm saying. They just have to find a way to be a little bit more creative and really find a way to get the ball back in the hands of Tyreek Hill. Because Tyreek Hill, when he's active, the Chiefs are winning ball games. I expect that to happen here in the near future. This is not a team that's just going to roll over and go away just because they're in last place after week 3. What about Terry McLaurin, Washington football team? How did he fall outside the top 24? Was it game script? No. Buffalo basically led that game from start to finish, and Washington was trailing to the point where they were going to have to throw all 4 quarters. The problem was that defense in Buffalo was basically just lights out for the most part. The opportunities, they just weren't really there Washington only threw the ball 24 times, which is not a lot considering how much they were trailing and how often they were trailing in this ball game. However, Terry McLaurin still led the team in targets with 7 and played in 96% of the snaps. No main turnovers to worry about, no other impacting injuries. So really, in conclusion, this had more to do with the Buffalo defense than the Washington offense or anything to do with Terry McLaurin. It was a bad day all around for the football team. The defense just hasn't come to play this year in Washington. It's putting a lot of added pressure on the offense. I don't think that Taylor Heinicke is some all-pro quarterback. However, the kid isn't doing half bad. He's still finding a way to get the ball in the hands of his best players, Terry McLaurin being one of them. I'm not overly worried about Terry McLaurin going forward. It was just one of those days that absolutely sucked when he ran into the Buffalo Bills defense. How about a couple of tight ends, the football kind? First one, TJ Hawkinson. Detroit Lions. How on God's green earth did TJ Hawkinson fall out of the top 10 of a horrible tight end position? Was it game script? Well, it's Detroit. You know they're going to be losing most of the time, or they're going to be trying to find a way to lose in a cool way. That's like what happens in Detroit. So you know it's not game script. They're going to have to throw weekly. What about opportunities? Well, the fewest targets he's had in a game so far this year. And why? It's kind of weird to just see that Darren Fells' snap percentage increased by 8%. Khalif Raymond's snap percentage increased by 12%. Really? Are we playing Darren Fells more and Khalif Raymond more and then targeting TJ Hawkinson less? Is that what we're doing in Detroit? Because that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, right? He didn't have any turnovers really to worry about. There was no impacting injuries, but Baltimore planned a way just to take away TJ Hawkinson, right? This is the conclusion here. Baltimore planned it. Their game plan going into this is we're going to take away TJ Hawkinson and force this offense to try to beat us a different way. And Baltimore has the personnel to do it. The problem is Detroit is just so willingly to go away from TJ Hawkinson. But this is just one of those games, right? TJ Hawkinson is going to be an elite tight end in fantasy football moving forward. He will be every single week. It's because this position absolutely sucks in fantasy football. There's like 4 or 5 good guys, and then after that, it's just a crapshoot. The volume will still be there for TJ Hawkinson. The looks inside the red zone will be there for TJ Hawkinson. It's just one of those bad matchups going up against Baltimore. I'm not overly worried about him going forward, though. Lastly, what about Darren Balls to the Waller of the Las Vegas Raiders? How did he fall outside the top 10? Was it game script? No, not really, because the Las Vegas Raiders fell behind early. They were going to have to throw the ball. What about his opportunities? Well, his snap percentage fell by 12%. Why? Why would it fall by 12%? It's because they were running the ball, and they were running the ball pretty well. Peyton Barber, I don't know what got into Peyton Barber. It's Peyton Barber, but the dude looked good this past weekend. And it resulted in the Raiders getting 31 carries by their running backs, which is, yes, going to take away some opportunities in the passing game. However, Darren Waller still saw the same target volume as he had in week 2, and Las Vegas had 6 different pass catchers with at least 5 targets. Remember, in week 1, everything, every play, every dropback was a target to Darren Waller. And we said at the end of that game, this dude's going to have like 200 targets. Well, they probably heard that, obviously, and I'm not going to say that's the reason they changed anything, but John Gruden realized early, we cannot rely on just one person. We have to get Hunter Renfrow included. We have to get Bryan Edwards included. We need to get our running backs more included, and all of a sudden, that's resulting in less targets going the way of Darren Waller. There was no turnovers to worry about, no impacting injuries. But honestly, in conclusion here, I think we were just spoiled by a huge week 1, right? Las Vegas figured out they need to utilize more than just Darren Waller. It's not a bad thing, though, because the volume is still going to be there in an offense which is still going to throw the ball a lot. He's their main red zone threat. He's a mismatch nightmare for every defense that he plays. But where we were kind of throwing him up there in that tier with Travis Kelce after week 1, he's just back down to earth, and he's back down solidified in that number 2, 3, 4 area as far as fantasy tight ends. But the guy, nothing to worry about. He's going to see huge volume here all year long. All right, so those are a few guys that we really wanted to dive a little bit deeper into, dissect a little bit, but there's a lot of other guys we could have included, right? You're probably watching this show saying, man, I wish you would have talked about so-and-so. Well, here's the good thing about that is I've kind of laid out a roadmap for you where you can insert any name, go look at these different opportunities and injuries and turnovers and what really played a part. And that's really going to help you be a better fantasy football manager for your roster every single week. Sure, it's fun to break down some of these players and talk about what had happened but now that you kind of have this blueprint, you can do it yourself for every person on your team. Like I said, though, if you want us to do this every single week, hit that like button, leave a comment down below, and continue helping us grow this channel by hitting that subscribe button as well. This number says 133,000. Can we get it to 140,000 by week 6? I would like to challenge you guys to think that it can happen, because you've done nothing but surprise me to this point, and we greatly appreciate that support. So hopefully you guys have a great rest of your week. A good luck here in week 4. Hopefully we don't have any big names on this list next week, but we'll find out. Have a great rest of your week. We'll talk to you later.